for tuning in to another episode of the Collision Vision, driven by Auto Body News. And as always, I'm your host, Cole Strandberg. Today's guest is Russ Ramsey, CEO of Blue Vista Data Systems. Russ's background, much like mine, includes a lot of time focused on supplying things and selling into the collision repair industry. So while Russ knows the industry and knows it well, he proclaims to be a bit of a, quote, outsider on the inside of the collision industry, and that resonates with me. Today, a lot of our conversation revolves around safety, training, reducing liability, and ensuring proper repairs, as well as some fun family business talk. Another theme of this episode: while I have spoken a lot in the past about ways to bring in more business to your collision center, Russ walks through opportunities to generate more profit within the business you already have. I hope you enjoy the show. Russ Ramsey, thank you for joining us here on the Collision Vision.
Thanks, Cole. Really appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Looking forward to a fun conversation here. Before we get in, I gave a little bit of your background at the top of the show, but if you would set the stage for us and briefly tell us a little bit about kind of your career and what you're up to today.
Okay. Well, I started out in 80 as a Detroit diesel mechanic apprentice, and quickly that moved over into automotive. Always had a love for cars as a kid and had my favorites growing up, but that slowly moved into the ability to own my own repair shop. And then we moved into doing customizing and body work and all of that type of repairs. We got expanded in that as it went on. And but in 1986, I met one of my customers, and he was in the business of selling fasteners and hardware. And that's when I was introduced to it. And so I transitioned from owning a shop to selling supplies like that to other shops.
Love it. Fantastic. And we'll dive a little bit deeper into what you're doing today later in the show. But the general consensus is you're previously an insider, but these days, I think you said the exact quote in our pre-show call was, you're an outsider on the inside. So some unique perspective, I think, here to come in this call. You and I have discussed a couple of kind of call them horror stories that you've seen out there where some reputable, I'll say with some air quotes, shops aren't making the proper repairs and not really even getting close. What are some of the more common mistakes or misconceptions you see out there, especially of late where vehicle technology is evolving?
Well, what I've seen since, like I said, I'm kind of on the inside of the shop. We're working with technicians and working with estimators and everybody. But what we've seen is a lot of times that the clip part of the industry is a little overlooked. It's not really taken that much importance to it. And consequently, shops don't really talk about that. They don't have a plan. And so there are a lot of cars, and even talking to many technicians, how many times that they just reuse the old clips on a car. It seems to happen a lot. The consensus I got from many of those technicians was at least 50% of the time they would not go over to the bin and get any new clips. They would just try and make work what they had or try and fix it out of their toolbox.
So talk to me about a couple of an example here of something you've seen done wrong and how we can do it differently, how we can learn from that.
Well, I personally had this happened to me. It was on my son's car. He had a Ford Focus. He bumped in the back of somebody. It needed a bumper replacement, and was taken to a dealership repair shop. And they did the repairs, looked great. A few months later, me and him needed to do some service work. We put it up on the hoist at our shop, only to find out that of the 6 retainers holding the lower shield on, 5 were completely missing. And the 6th retainer was just barely in there. We could just pull it out. So we were looking at it. And then we went to our website to figure out exactly which retainer goes on it. Come to find out they missed it by a couple of millimeters on the size of the retainer. So that shield was flopping all around. It had a couple of screws in it to hold it in place, but we were really surprised at that point as to what had happened there. Another time, dealing with one of my shops that I had dealt with in the past, they called me in an emergency, and they were working on a Lexus, and they needed the retainers for the sensors in the bumper. And they kind of called in a panic because they called the dealer. The dealer didn't have any, and these retainers were very expensive retainers, and wanted to know if I had some. Well, it is an OEM only retainer, so I did have a couple, but not enough to fix the car and get the car out the door. So they said, all right, well, we'll figure out what to do. And later on, I was able to find out that they actually, at least the technician told me, that they just glued them together and put the car back together. So I was thinking that's, and sensors on retainers, maybe they affect ADAS, maybe they don't, maybe they're just parking sensors. And that was one of the really strong cases that made me just think, like, these people have got to really get a plan. And shops don't always have that plan worked out. It's many of those type of things, I think, happen regularly, and shops just get by.
Yep. It's, we talk about it all the time. It's a very different world than it was even just 5 or 10 years ago in terms of new things to think about in vehicle technology when we're making repairs. And it's a great segue into, and we talked about this also in our pre-show call, is the liability that comes with improper repairs in general, kind of zooming out, where you hear about it a little too often, where unfortunately, ignorance and lack of training and lack of knowledge is not an excuse for poor repairs, but I think too often it's the case. What are some ways from your perspective that shops can sort of protect themselves and ensure quality technical training?
Well, one thing's for sure, Cole, that liability, and when there's a problem, it always reflects back on the owner or the manager when there's a problem. But really, it comes from the technician. And shops need to discuss this really at their shop meetings. They need to discuss when a suspension component is replaced or repaired. Are they looking to the manufacturer for the information, or looking on all data to see what the torque specs are? Are they identifying the torque to yield fasteners that are one-time use? Those are just a few of the things that they really need to think about. That's just in that portion of it is important. I don't think shops talk enough about that, and let alone when to replace the retainers and when to not replace them. They should have a plan, but also too, the cost of fasteners are not inexpensive. So that's also should be part of their plan, when they should be discussing that regularly, at a shop meeting, because each manufacturer is completely different, and how they identify products, how they put them on their one-time use or not. If you're just repairing a car, the way the technician looks at it, it's like, well, I've been repairing cars for a long time, I'm just going to continue to do it that way. That may not fit modern vehicles, where suspension components are different, and they're changed, and the way that they're installed, let alone the technology of all these vehicles, is much greater than what it used to be.
Man, it's such a common theme in every aspect of collision repair. Is the technicians, the term technician now can mean a couple different things. It's gone from technician to tech, techie kids who we're playing with computers on wheels now more than traditional automobiles. And I think that changes every piece of the collision repair process, from the ADAS component you mentioned to, we talk about it when we have the EV conversation and the safety concerns that come along with those batteries. I guess diving a little bit deeper into this from a quality control perspective, generally speaking, how can shops ensure that they are putting out good work? And from a business owner or business leader's standpoint, what are some of the plans they could put in place to ensure the product that is leaving is up to their specs?
Well, that's a good question. So there's a lot of new cars with a lot of fasteners, and those fasteners are changing. And interestingly enough, like in iCar in their training, I believe it is in the production manager training under the workflow essentials, they have a list of the most common items, and there's 6 on that list. 5 of them are clips and retainers. So that is definitely something that it can be easily overlooked. The other thing included in that is really you're talking about touch time for technicians. We're trying to be efficient. We're trying to, get cars out the door. And if the touch time is 4 to 5 hours on the average per day for a technician, and they're out scrambling, trying to find clips or trying to solve those problems because they don't really have a plan in place, that's going to cut into that. That's going to cut into the cycle time. It could turn into problems just even with bad CSI. You get in a hurry, you got to send the car out the door. It's late. We get calls a lot on Thursday and Friday from shops who, in an emergency, didn't find out that they needed a specific clip that only fits one application, and they call us wanting to know, do you have these? Can we deliver them? We promised this car, the customer is on his way, or something along that line. And it happens regularly that this just doesn't work out smoothly. It's just not something that flows. And so it's something that definitely they need to think about having a plan. There's no doubt about that.
Well, and you hit the nail on the head. I think as a topic, a lot of what we're talking about is pretty zoomed out, but a lot of it's a little bit more zoomed in than is typical for an episode of the Collision Vision. But I think that's why it's important. We're talking the business side of the collision industry. When you don't have a plan there, you do increase the time that you have the vehicle, you decrease profitability potentially. What percentage, in your estimation, of body shops out there actually have a plan or a sophisticated system in place to address that?
I think there's a few that are run very efficiently, and we've been into some of those shops, and you can tell when you walk in, this shop has it all laid out. Things work really smooth. I've seen some of those, and I love to pick their brain on how they came to that process. But then we walk into other shops where they are limiting the amount of retainers that they're buying from their supplier because it's a budget they're trying to give them, and they'll limit down. So what happens is technicians only have a few retainers to choose from. They're trying to reuse the old ones, or they're trying to make something fit that doesn't really fit. And that is definitely not the best way to go. And so shops that have a plan and that work that plan, they just need to talk about it and get it figured out. And that's really kind of what we do. We help shops with that.
Awesome. Very good. Next couple questions I have are going to be kind of really zoomed out, and I want to tap into your passion from a young age for cars and talk about what we're seeing today in terms of vehicle technology evolution, and eventually, and we'll get to this, kind of what you foresee down the road. Before we dive fully into that, talk to me what we are seeing in new vehicle technology, and some of these cars out here have some nuances that could be easily missed and represent some of those liability concerns we talked about earlier. What are some trends out there you're noticing?
Well, one thing I've noticed for sure that, starting back in 1986, a lot of the fasteners were metal. They were body bolts, fold over nuts and screws, not a lot of plastic. Now, fast forward currently, in our inventory, we have over 12,000 clip part numbers. So that has clearly evolved into its own segment. And many of these are new cars with a whole brand new set of clips, brand new type of retainers. And if those retainers aren't readily available, they got to have a way to do that. And getting it from the dealer or identifying it, which isn't always that easy on the estimating system. You can easily see the fender on an estimating system, but when you look at the clips, you're not really seeing the actual clip. So those type of things kind of are an issue. and I can see it potentially becoming more and more. We see clips coming into our warehouse that are so unique and so one application that a shop is just not going to get by with just a few anymore.
Yep, makes total sense. Now, for the forward-looking piece of this, pull out your crystal ball and generally with vehicle technology for me. Given your background in the industry, your passion from a young age, 1986, a lot has changed. What are some of the biggest changes in kind of the entire repair industry that you've seen in vehicle technology and design from your perspective?
Well, no doubt vehicles have completely changed, and they evolve every year. I mean, just look at the cars that are coming out. But one thing on our side we know for sure is that in a body shop industry, no cars leave a body shop without fasteners on them. And there are so many, but as this develops and as these clips become unique and different for each car, that's something that we're going to have to keep track of. And I recently had a post on LinkedIn where I listed about 10 different clips. And on those clips, not one of those retainers was less than $7.50. Many of them were in the $10 range. So fasteners are not cheap anymore. And if a shop misses getting them ordered early on in the job, and later they have to get them from the car dealership, maybe they've already sent through all the paperwork, the job's done, they're just waiting to deliver it, and then they spend $150 or even $50 at the car dealership. They've bought clips that are only for that application. And so that's something that needs to be addressed. Shops need to be forward thinking in how to handle these type of situations. But it all comes back to planning. It all comes down to having a system with the technicians, with the estimators on how this gets handled, not waiting till the end of the job.
Sure. Now, any predictions for the future? Just from my perspective, taking into account all of the significant changes of the last 5, 10, 15 years, what do you think lies ahead for us over the next 5, 10, 15 years?
I think for sure, as far as this type of a product goes, and even in the body shop's industry, is training. Training has got to be a way, manufacturer training, manufacturer input. iCar training is the key. You've got to know what's going on. You got to know the changes. And if you're a technician from a ways back, you got to know that there's changes. And so moving ahead, you've got to keep up with those. That's in the future, that it's going to be more and more complicated. There's going to be more and more items. And if you are prepared and you have a plan, then you'll get through it.
That's it. That's what it's all about. And so true in every facet of the collision industry. It's a challenging time with all the craziness and the evolution and the continuous challenges that exist. They're magnified today with a lot going on, but at the same time, for those willing to invest in that training and the equipment and the systems, there's never been a greater opportunity in this industry. And I think that's the general consensus here on the Collision Vision among every guest we've had on here, which is an exciting thing. So, Russ, we're both sort of coming from the distribution world. Myself, I consider myself a bit of an industry outsider turned insider. I think you view yourself the same way, but we have another thing in common as well. And whenever this comes up, regular listeners know I love to talk about it. We're both part of a family business, whereas my dad was in the business and I was the second generation. You have some kids involved in your business. Tell me about that and your experience working with family.
Well, we have had this distribution company since 1986, and my kids aren't that old, but they have grown up here working at the office and the warehouse, and have worked for me for all those years growing up, even doing homeschool and working here. So they have really had the ability to learn a lot about cars, and a lot about customers and how to help customers, help them solve their problems with the fastener industry, what we're really mostly dedicated to. But they're taking that over, which is freeing up more time really for me to be able to work directly with more shops, helping them to develop this plan and to solve this as a future problem. So we're helping them on the one side with the products, but also in the other side, we're helping them to solve a future problem that, like we talked about, is coming up, and it's here, but it could get a lot worse, and that's all surrounding the change of vehicles.
Sure, absolutely. Well, awesome, man. Always love hearing of family businesses within the space. I like to say when it works, it really, really works, and it's a lot of fun. For me, it was my dad, my mom, my now wife, all under one roof, and just a great memories there for sure. Well, Russ, we got a couple more things to talk about, but I want to go ahead and start wrapping our conversation up. As you know, we like to end each episode of the Collision Vision with 3 key takeaways. From your perspective, what would those takeaways be today?
One, I think that body shops need to really be aware of the cost of fasteners. Fasteners are not cheap anymore, and body shops don't put fenders on cars for free. And these products are definitely a billable product. So they need to be aware of that. And they also need to know for their technicians need to know when I should be replacing the fasteners and when I should be trying to reuse them. That's the first one.
All right.
Second, I would say for the second one, the technicians definitely need to be educated on the proper use of suspension fasteners. Many techs are doing some of that work. Some shops have dedicated mechanical guys, but a lot of shops don't. And those technicians need to know on those specific fasteners. There's people's lives are at stake with some of those products, but also too, even just making sure the job goes out the door looking nice and working properly. You've got to give a warranty on it, your shop does. So you need to make that plan in place to know that when that car goes out, you don't have to worry about it coming back. And I think that leads me into my third one too, where every shop needs to develop their own comprehensive plan on how they're going to handle this. They need to have discussions. They need to talk about the process that they're going to take, and talk about the impact to cycle time if they don't do it and treat it like they do other parts. It should be treated just like other parts, these fasteners.
Beautiful. Good takeaways there. And tell us, as we wrap up, a little bit about the current state of Blue Vista and how we can get in touch with you and the team.
Okay, well, Blue Vista Data is our bluevistadata.com is our website. And that is a website built around identification of all fasteners for virtually every car by location, OEM part number, quantity used, and a photograph of each retainer. So that in itself is sort of a database that helps shops to identify them. We talked about a little bit earlier, shops spend a lot of time searching the internet for fasteners. And so this one tool alone, just that portion of it, can cut hours out of a shop. So that, and we've got a built-in invoicing system, which allows them to get their money back and be able to bill for the products that they are stocking in their own body shop. So that's
Beautiful.
what Blue Vista is about. They can reach me on LinkedIn, or they can reach me at Ramsey, bluevistadata.com. And that's our website. They can reach me through there or call the office. And if they want to talk to me, I'd be glad to talk to anybody that calls. And if they want us to help them or give them some ideas on getting that plan put in place and what it would take, and give them a few ideas, we're certainly happy to do that.
Fantastic. I will be sure to include all of those links in the show notes to make that easier for those listeners who are not in a position to write that down. So take a look there. Otherwise, Russ, thank you so much for your time and your insight. I think you're a valuable resource for anybody looking to have some more information in this sector. But Russ Ramsey, thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you, Cole. It's been my pleasure. Appreciate it.
Thanks again to Russ Ramsey for joining us on today's show. A lot of valuable insights packed in there that very well could lead to increased profitability in your collision business. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the Collision Vision, both wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube, where the Collision Vision lives in video form. As always, on behalf of the Auto Body News team and myself, thank you for coming along for the ride.